All right, it's 7 o'clock. I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Selectman Muska, would you do the honors?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, all members of the Board of Selectmen are here and present. Our first item of business is the approval of our meeting minutes from November 21st.
I move to approve the November 21st, 2024 Board of Selectmen regular meeting minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any discussion or corrections?
One thing on page 5, number 12, under executive session. Says Selectman Yagaloff amended the motion to include. And so it should say the competitive bidding has been waived on account of the cost being paid by the owner, and there's the word should be
I'm
and.
sorry, I can't hear you.
We need the word and in there. Oh, I'm sorry, Marie, page 5,
Yep,
number 12,
yep.
I amended it. Motion. There should be an and there. It said paid by the owner and due to time constraints of Superior Court enforcement action. I'm just asking just to make that one small correction. Yeah.
That seems relatively picayune, but anybody else have anything?
Well, it's not because I made 2 points and it's not written the way it's so.
I don't see what
I'm
he's,
making the correction. It's not picayune. I'm just fixing it. Why would you say that?
Because it's in
We're fixing the minutes.
Scrivener's error.
Yeah, that's what we do. We fix the minutes.
All right, any other corrections?
I don't know what he's correcting.
Not clear either.
Can you, give me the tutorial? I don't know what you're,
Yeah, Marie.
where you want the and in there.
Wanted after the word owner, we waived competitive bidding. Specifically, I asked to put in the minutes, the reasons why we waived competitive bidding. There were 2 reasons. One was because of the cost paid for by the owner, and the second reason was due to the time constraints of the Superior Court enforcement action. So I had 2 reasons for wanting to put in there that we waive competitive bidding. It's important that we put in our minutes why we waive competitive
So
bidding.
between time and constraints,
Right,
you want an and in there?
and the owner and due to time constraints.
Any other corrections?
Jason said it was picayune.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Our communication, we do have one from the town of South Windsor. That's in your packet. Oh, public participation. This is one of 2 opportunities for members of the public to address the Board of Selectmen. If you'd like to address the board, please start by stating your name and your address and then state your business. I will first provide anybody who's here in the room an opportunity to address the board, and then I'll provide the same to anybody who is with us online. Is there anybody here who would like to address the board? So state your name and your address and then state your business. Yes, ma'am. You may, sure. Well, there will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting. Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Is there anybody online who would like to address the board? If so, kindly unmute yourself, state your name and your address, and state your business. Okay, we will come back. Now we are on to correspondence. There is one. There's a letter from the town of South Windsor. It was not addressed to us, but I included it because we were CC'd.
Ask a question about the, in the package, it's not only, the communication is not only the letter from the town of South Windsor, but we also got the letter from the town of East Windsor. Is that also part of the record of the communication that we're putting on the record tonight?
Yes.
Can I ask a question? Was this written on behalf of the town of South Windsor, East Windsor, with the Board of Selectmen being consulted?
So communications are not an agenda item. They're passing along information. If you'd like, I'll put it on as an agenda item, but that'll be a subsequent meeting.
I thought it was on the agenda. It's communications.
They're not discussed or debated topics. It's an FYI section. That's always been what we do.
Well, I just wanted to know whether or not this was represented, is this communication which is important concerning Shank Road? Is this from the first selectman, or is this from the town of East Windsor with the board of selectmen's input
I wrote the letter with input from the town attorney.
without the selectmen being involved?
I wrote the letter.
Without the selectmen being involved?
I have answered that. We're going to move on now. All right, we have one new appointment. Richard Pippin has volunteered to join the Water Pollution Control Authority. He has submitted his application. I think everybody knows him. I'm glad to see him. I think this fills out that board, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he would be replacing Steve Smith as a regular member.
Make a motion to appoint Richard P. Pippin Jr., Republican, Water Pollution Control Authority Board, regular member for a term expiring October 1, 2029.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, is Steve resigning?
Yeah.
Or has he
Yeah,
resigned?
I think he's moved. Did he move? Steve Smith?
I believe he moved out.
I believed he moved.
Yeah, I know he was planning to move. I'm not sure if he has.
But did we approve his resignation?
I don't think he
remember
submitted
seeing
it, but his term expired.
His term is expired, okay. Oh, October, that's it. Well, that's all I have. I just wanted to question that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Now, the main event for the evening, we have guests from H2M who are going to discuss their work doing a facility study of the Broadbrook Fire Department. Nick, do you want to introduce them first?
So, thank you, by the way, the Board of Selectmen for this opportunity for H2M to come present. So the town of East Windsor Broadbrook Fire Commission, last year went out to bid and did an assessment study on the feasibility of the use of the fire station for its current use and then projection in the future. You guys know it was built in 1980 and there are a number of issues with the building. And given that the seniors are tentatively moving out of there, we want to know what the long-term viability of the facility would be for its current purpose and, like I said, into the future. So H2M was contracted. They are professionals. That's their business, is to assess facilities for their uses. And I'll turn it right over to them and let them go into their presentation. And then I'm going to speak afterwards on a couple of points real quick. Sure.
We are setting that up. Thank you for putting us up front. We do appreciate that.
I understand you guys are coming from New York.
Well, a 2-hour drive.
Hopefully we'll have you home before.
It's only a 2-hour drive. It's not a huge deal.
Well, in this weather, it could be a huge day.
It could be. Thank you. Do we need to hook up to this?
She's got it as soon as she's sure.
So while we're doing that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Dennis Ross. I've been an architect for 45 years, I think. My personal specialty is emergency service facilities, including fire, police, EMS, 911 call centers, et cetera, et cetera. As far as fire stations, I have personally worked on over 400 fire stations personally.
So you know your way around.
Experience.
A little bit of experience. Aubrey,
Hi, my name's Aubrey Dunn. I'm a staff designer too at H2M. I've been with the company for 2 years and I work primarily on EMS, public safety facilities.
That's fine, Mike. One of the reasons H2M was selected was the qualifications of the individuals that be involved in the project. And I don't want Dennis to be modest. I want you to be honestly, what board were you a part of in terms of certifications?
I'll go through some of that, but I was the only architect in the country who was selected to be on the NFPA board to write a new regulation 1585 on occupational health and hazards for firefighters specifically. We have written that and now we're incorporating all sorts of other regulations into it. So I guess I'm still on the committee. And once they get a volunteer, they never let them go.
I'm curious, does H2M do things other than emergency facilities?
Yes, I'm going to show you who H2M is and what we do. But yeah,
Thank you.
that's a great question. So who is H2M? H2M is 580 people right now. We have architects, engineers, scientists. We work in architecture, all forms of engineering, civil, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We do work in education, higher education, office buildings, senior housing, certainly K through 12 and on, and the list goes on. There's very little we don't do. the company has 10 offices, mostly on the East Coast. In New York, we have 5 or 6, a couple in New Jersey, Florida, Pennsylvania, we have an office. Connecticut, we have an office in south side of Hartford. So it's spread around the East Coast. So on the emergency services and public safety side of things, again, we do, as Nick said, building assessments, design, feasibility studies, anything and everything that might apply to fire, police, EMS, et cetera, and any blend of that. We are a full service firm, so we do it all in-house. And as Nick said, the people involved, there's myself, one of my partners, David Pacheco, who has been in the business for 40 years, also working in emergency services, maybe not 400 stations, but probably close to 250. Patrick Stone is in our Melville, Long Island office. He has our market. Patrick is a volunteer firefighter down in Long Island. And then, of course, Aubrey, who's now with our group. So, and there's a lot of people behind us, but these are the specific people who have been working on your project. And we like to say we're at the forefront of the industry. We do a lot of writing, a lot of public speaking. We present at national symposiums. And if you look down in the right-hand corner, it says FDIC. That is a fire trade show. It's the largest one in the country, second largest in the world. We were invited 2 years ago to help them inaugurate part of their trade show into Lucas Oil Stadium, because they're right next door at the exhibition center. They had seen a presentation we did called Fire Station of the Future. They asked us to design it, which we did. They actually built it in the end zone of the stadium. And we had over 20,000 visitors to that station. Just to give you an idea, obviously it was built out of trade show materials and whatnot. The real issue is, how does the station work? What's in it? Why is it in it? What's different than today? And we gave tours and talked about all that. So, and we speak at Station Design Conference, Fiero, both national symposiums. I've been speaking at Fiero for 20 years. So we like to think we're at the forefront of what's going on in the fire service. You can read all the fine print later. And there is the rescue station of the future. So behind me is electric vehicles, robots, drones, and then throughout the station, there's obviously a pile of technology, triage centers, advanced EMS, and biophilic design, and all sorts of other things that we put in there. All right, now let's get down to what's important to you folks. Broadbridge Fire Department.
Who is the Broadbrook Fire Department? They are volunteers and paid staff. They're your emergency responders, including fire rescue and EMS. They include 65 volunteers and only 11 part-time paid staff. They were your frontline workers through the COVID pandemic. Monthly meetings are held the second Thursday of the month. Drill meetings occur twice a month. State training is required for all active members. Each member is required to complete 180 hours of training before becoming eligible to become state certified. Additional training hours are required for OSHA and Fire Academy throughout the year, include extrication, leadership, incident command system, hazmat, OSHA, FAST, truck operations, bailout, safety officer, EVOC, and first responder with classes, each ranging from 8 to 24 hours. Here's a lovely photo of the group. They are highly trained, dedicated, motivated, and most importantly, community-based volunteers.
So this slide really doesn't have to be read or anything, but in the fire service, you're going to find out there's a lot of definitions, a lot of acronyms. We wanted to include this in your package, so if you see this or you hear it, at least you can refer to it. I'll talk about two things that are extremely important though. You're going to hear a lot about hot or red zones and green or cold zones. About 12 to 15 years ago, some people started doing some studies on firefighters and found out that their rate of cancer was way, way, way above any other profession or the general public. They started tracing out why. And it turns out that when they operate on calls, whether it be wildfires, house fires, any kind of fire, the smoke and the fumes that get on them and on their equipment are carcinogenic, cause cancer, all forms of cancer. And as they bring that back to the station and then carry it with them to the bunks or offices, the kitchen, wherever, all right, they're being exposed constantly. They take it home to their families on their bodies. So what's been happening in the last 12 or 15 years is the architectural profession realized that, hey, we can actually design buildings and redesign buildings to physically combat that by bringing the carcinogens back into what we call a red zone or a hot zone, controlling it in those zones, moving from that zone through what we call a transition period or transition area, I'm sorry, where you can clean off, get your dirty gear off, clean the gear, clean yourself before you move into offices and living spaces, right? You're not carrying the carcinogens with you, right? So when we talk about hot zones, green zones, the yellow zone is the transition area. You're going to hear a lot of this. You'll read it in articles. If you read anything about fire service, it is probably the single number one thing that's been in architectural design for fire, and now it's starting to be for police because they're also carrying carcinogens. The other thing you might hear a lot about is future proofing. If you look at what firefighters did in 1980, maybe 150 calls a year, mostly fires, maybe some accidents, and you look at what they're doing now, they're assisting the police, they're doing all sorts of accidents, road rage problems, urban area problems, anything. So as they change and their mandate changes, so does the equipment. So you'll see a lot about future proofing, designing for the ability to be flexible in the future. And those are some of the things. And then as we talk, if I hit an acronym or something you don't understand, please just let me know. So as I mentioned, breakdown of the calls for 2023 was 820 calls. Going to probably approach that or maybe a few more. And Nick, what was it again in 80? About 150 calls?
Yeah, I think you have charted, it was 100 calls with 1980.
Yeah. So as you can see, to make that many calls, you need more apparatus, more equipment, more people, and they're going out obviously more often. And they're different kinds of calls. Yes, sir.
Okay, what's the difference between a hazardous condition call, a fire, and what would an example of an other call for service be?
Another call for service, good question, could be something like false alarm, like in a nursing home, for example, or any kind of false alarm, pumping out a basement maybe might be another other call.
Okay.
Welfare checks, lockout, tagout, people that are locked out of their homes, things like that.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
But what's the difference between a fire and hazardous conditions?
Nick, you're the firefighter.
Yeah, I mean, a hazardous condition, Chief Tom, then you want to speak up on this, but.
Hazardous condition would be like a power line down,
Oh, all right.
oil truck overfilled,
Fine example. Thank you.
spilled some oil on the road, that would be like a hazardous condition.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Trees and wires all the time now.
So it looks like the majority of the increase is due to the medical calls that you guys are doing that you didn't do back in 1980.
Yes.
And the other would be the fire alarms and CO alarms that more businesses, there's more need to go out and
Sure.
do the fires, which we didn't have all that buildings and apartments back in 1980. So when we're comparing, we need to compare apples to apples, not apples to oranges.
Well, I think
because
that's a fair statement, but I think
What's
it's,
the
the fire service is not apples anymore. It's apples, oranges,
Right.
yellows, pineapples,
Right.
you name it. Look at
Yep.
what we're doing and
Yep.
what you're doing in 1980.
Oh, and I have great respect for what you're doing, but it's gonna be, somebody's gonna say, well, how they're comparing 1980 to, 2024, you know how that goes. So I
It's a
just
fair
pointing it out, so this way,
You gotta remember back in the early eighties, there was, no real oh, just gasoline on the ground, right?
Yeah, you just went and did
Down the
it.
drain and that's it, now it's
Yeah.
a lot more.
But even if you back out the medical calls, it's only 362 out of 820. And that's still a high number compared to 100
Mhm.
in 1980. It's fivefold over.
Which makes sense because of the growth in town.
That's the start.
Oh, all right.
Little head.
Got my mouth.
No, you're doing great. Keep going.
So you just mentioned since 1980, you can see the graph on the right, comparing the population versus the number of calls. As you can see, the population has increased substantially, grown by over 30%, putting additional strain on emergency services. As discussed before, the calls have surged from around 100 annually in 1980 to over 820 today. The existing station is no longer equipped to meet the demands of the expanded community. So expanding the facility to include not only gender equality, firefighter health and safety, as Dennis was saying, to support today's firefighters, firefighting needs is essential to maintaining an effective and timely response for the emergencies.
All right, so a little bit about your existing stations. So there are inadequacies, as Aubrey mentioned. It doesn't have any ability to meet current ADA, American with Disabilities Act. All right, for those of you who don't know, the ADA is civil law. It is not a code. All right. This building, because it is funded through the town, it makes it a public building. As a public building, that means it's a Title II public building according to the ADA. It needs to be fully accessible. That doesn't just mean an elevator, it means bathrooms, accessibility to the hallways, ability to open and close doors, get in a kitchen and use the kitchen properly. Again, civil law, there's a lot to it. Also, the building doesn't meet current codes for OSHA and, current fire codes and building codes for Connecticut. So from that point of view, just from codes and regulations, it is inadequate. We'll talk a little bit more about, there's other things that play into that. Yes, sir.
Sorry, ladies
Sorry.
first.
Yes,
Just for clarification.
Sure.
The ADA and the code issues that you say that we're not in compliance.
Mhm.
We're not in compliance, but we don't need to be in compliance right now because we're not doing any renovations to the building. Correct.
That is correct.
I just want to clarify that because I don't want to get the town up and uproar that.
You are absolutely
Okay,
correct.
just wanted to clarify.
Yep.
Okay.
And the ADA concern that you raise is for accessibility, right?
Correct.
To the building.
To the building and the site.
How is the site not accessible?
The site is accessible, but I'm saying the
Right.
ADA covers the building and the site.
Okay, and how is the building not accessible?
There is no elevator in the building, so you can't get from one floor to the other.
But there is a ramp and a driveway to the ramp.
There is a driveway to the ramp. There is a ramp that gets you onto the second floor.
Yeah.
Right? And there's also a way where you can drive in and get into the first floor
Yes.
from the driveway.
Yep.
Okay. What you can't do is get from the first floor to the second to the first without going outside the building.
Okay, that's the issue.
And that's the issue.
Only a staircase that goes up to the back of the fire department.
Right.
Gotcha.
So, you bring up good points, but again, the ADA is very specific. You bring up an excellent point.
I'm asking questions. I don't have a point I'm making. I'm
But
trying
the
to
question is
educate
leading to
myself.
what other people are going to ask. So it's a great question. And the other thing, clearly, where the inadequacies arise is in firefighter health and safety and well-being. They are surrounded by areas, hot zones and carcinogens, and have little or no ability to properly get through a transition zone and upstairs into the clean zone. This is no actual space to do that. There are no current facilities to do that.
We don't have that slide. Is that something that you guys could email to us?
Yes, certainly do
It's
that.
in the new package. It's in the new
This is
package.
not the new one?
No,
That's
the
full.
old package.
No, I have it. I just grabbed it.
Right, we did on this table.
All right.
I'm gonna move my note now.
And then again, not compliant with standards. So again, you have NFPA, which is National Fire Protection Association. They are not for profit and they pretty much write the regulations for all the fire service in terms of operations and how they operate, live, and breathe, and what they do and how they respond. And again, in terms of certainly the set of regulations in 1500, which are all about health, safety, and well-being, the station is far from compliant. All right, so.
Another reason why the existing station isn't adequate is due to the lack of gender equity. Actually lead to legal and social liabilities due to the lack of inclusive design within the station. So having lactation rooms, single user restrooms, etc. We kind of touched on this before. The station lacks ADA compliant ramps, elevators, internal access from the first to the second floor, forcing personnel and visitors to have to exit the building to go from floor to floor. As discussed, also, the building does not currently meet ADA compliant bathrooms, kitchen, circulation, designated parking spaces, creating accessibility barriers for individuals with disabilities.
So before we move on, if you look at the middle picture, see a piece of apparatus parked up next to the wall?
Yeah.
That is dangerously close to the wall. All right, so for firefighters who are, putting on their gear or even going out to that piece of apparatus, and if that piece of apparatus is moving, it is just dangerously close, meaning the bays are extremely small for today's apparatus. So again, just some of the things, that in terms of codes and regulations that do affect the fire service. We mentioned ADA, OSHA, FEMA, ASHRAE, Homeland Security, NFPA. Some are codes, many are standards, but these are all things in current fire station design and renovation that all come into play. So they're complex buildings. Okay.
Talk about the benefits of the new station. One of the main points is this is a primarily volunteer group. So recruitment and retention is very important, vital to make sure that, in the future, potentially, we may have to move to career fire stations, but in the meantime, this is a recruitment and retention is very important. Another benefit would be improved space to facilitate operational efficiencies. Like Dennis said, there's a lot of space constraints on the first floor, which is where they're responding from. It's the primary area. Another benefit is design the facility for future proofing, as Dennis mentioned earlier, in order to meet the current station trends, allowing for the flexibility, training, health, but most importantly, well-being of the occupants. Another benefit is clearly defined hot, cold, and transition zones, as we talked about, which will significantly reduce the risk of cross-contamination, compliance for all of the NFPA standards that Dennis mentioned earlier, ADA compliant infrastructure, and again, reduce gender equality liabilities, allowing for more inclusive design. So we evaluated 2 sites. The first one was 2 Reservoir Ave, and the second was 38 Main Street, which is the current middle school. So our first step was to go through programming, which was an extensive meeting where we discussed the exact needs, which helped inform space use, which you can see on the right, which is an analysis going through each of the required spaces and the approximate square footage requirements. During this time, we discussed scope and we began iterating several building preliminary block diagrams, which you can see here. This is the proposed site layout 1 at 2 Reservoir Ave. You can see it's right at the corner of Reservoir Ave and Windsorville Road. The reason why we liked this approach was because you have the corner so that you can respond from either Reservoir Ave or Windsorville Road. In fire and EMS, response time is critical. So being able to respond on either road is, very beneficial.
And just to make the diagram understandable, the red would represent the actual apparatus bays. The orange, yellow, whatever color you want to call it, would be what we call support spaces. Those spaces that directly support the operations and the response, things like your SCBA, single contained breathing air, your apparatus gear that they wear, lockers, workrooms, the storage rooms, and then the blue is virtually everything else on the cold zone, offices, bunks, kitchen, day room, things like that.
The second site that we looked at 38 Main Street, again, the existing middle school, we look at using potentially some of the existing building, and then constructing a new apparatus bay and paramedic support areas. The reason why we decided not to move forward with the second site plan is due to a couple things, mainly this would be depending on the purchase of the potential land acquisition of lot, I think that says 14. Currently, that is a shared driveway with the neighboring house, so this would not be a feasible site. These are the proposed elevations at 2 Reservoir Ave. You can see on the right, if you see my mouse, there are 6 double deep drive-through apparatus bays, a training tower in the center. Over here on the north elevation, that would be the public entrance. And then this piece in the center would be the bunk spaces, admin spaces, or offices, etc.
A little easier to understand on this one.
Yeah, 3D view is a little bit more clear to understand. Again, you can see the training tower, 6 double deep apparatus bays, the admin and bunk spaces, and then this part connecting them is the public areas, the training center, and the kitchen, day room.
Can I just ask, just for, on the 6 bays, are those bays intended for just fire, ambulance, or fire, ambulance, and police?
Fire and ambulance.
Just fire and ambulance alone?
Yep.
Clear fire and fire department EMS.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah,
What's the difference?
You have an ambulance service. in town.
right.
That's not included.
That's not part of it.
So what is the fire EMS then?
We respond to all ALS calls, advanced life support calls right now currently.
They're first responders.
We're
for the
first
town.
responders to ALS calls. Those are the EMS calls that we respond to.
All right, so it's medical response from the fire department. It's not EMS.
Yes,
Okay.
it's not ambulance.
Right, different.
There's no transport.
You have a question?
Yes.
Yes.
Under, and I forget the terminology you use, under the future things you, say that again,
Future proofing.
future proofing. Is there enough room if we were to include a police station in that?
That's a
On that
great
property?
question. And the answer is yes. Let's go back.
Site layout one, so we specifically designed this layout to be able to easily accommodate a police program. You can see my mouse, I'm kind of hovering over that allotted space. And the convenience of this, this public space would be able to have shared spaces. So there'd be a potential cost savings there, being able to share those spaces.
Our police chief was asked a question about whether or not they would want to locate their facility, a new facility on this side of town, and the answer was no. He thought that it would be more beneficial to locate it on the current side of town because most of their calls are coming from the Route 5 area. So he was asked that question. So I don't think, unless you know differently, I don't think there's any plan for like a public safety complex, including police and what you're proposing here, right?
I don't know about any plans, but we wanted to make sure that we could accommodate it if it came up.
Right.
Let me clarify my station. I, as an individual on the Board of Selectmen, was questioning that in case I want to propose something later on. So that way I knew the answer. I don't want to propose something that I might be interested in if there's not enough space for it. So it's just clarification for my mind. I'm not saying we're doing a police station. I'm not saying police, department and fire department adjoining. It's just, I want to make sure if that was an option down the road,
Absolutely.
if it was available.
It's important to note the scope of work that H2M was contracted for was to look at the feasibility study for the Broadway Fire.
Mhm.
It was not to look at a public safety complex comprehensively.
Right.
That being said, we invited the conversation so that if that was a future study that this board wanted to pursue, H2M has already laid the groundwork to be able to actively go into that study with ease.
And I appreciate that.
And
Okay, so one of the things that we do find is that in the way we design our apparatus space and that support spaces I was talking about earlier, things like gear, workrooms, et cetera, right? Apparatus bays generally on the inside of the bay are somewhere between 18 and 20 foot tall. Those other workspaces are typical spaces, they're 9 foot tall. So if we lay a slab over the top of those spaces and build them as part of the bay, we get this huge mezzanine space for very, very incremental cost. And in that space, we can do all sorts of active training regimens, which means they can stay on the station to train. It's a great recruitment tool. They don't have to go elsewhere. They don't have to pay for it elsewhere. It's all right at the station. For anybody who's familiar with the Norwalk fire station, we have over 60 training regimens on their mezzanine. So it's fairly easy to do, and it is, again, very incremental cost and something we would propose.
energy and sustainability, we would incorporate in our design to include on-site drainage, stormwater management, construction activity, pollution prevention, incorporate local materials, indigenous landscaping, oil water separator for the trench drains, and a grease interceptor for the kitchen waste, as well as provide infrastructure for the future for future proofing. And of course, incorporate or take a look at overall energy and efficiency, incorporate high efficiency HVAC, high insulation values, etc.
What do you mean by provide infrastructure for the future? What are you proposing here that's not part of the plan to build?
So with the introduction of electric apparatus, okay, a huge amount of charging would add, just a huge amount of additional electrical service, for example, and may change your generator size or add another generator. We want to accommodate it. We don't want to install it day one unless it's absolutely necessary. I don't believe they have any electric apparatus currently. Is that correct? But it's coming.
That's are pushing that though.
Oh, it's coming. It's out there. It's being built as we speak. It's all over Europe. Los Angeles Fire Department has it. It's going to be here, believe me, in 10, 15 years. They're going to be all electric. It's happening. And there are construction options for any type of building. So there's an all masonry type of option, for construction, what we call brick and mortar, if you will. There's a lot more to it than just brick and mortar. It would be a steel frame building with masonry, walls. Then you have on the complete opposite end of that, you have what we call prefabricated structures, things like Butler buildings. You see them in barns and storage buildings all the time. And then you have what we call hybrid construction, which would be mushing the two of those together where it makes sense to have the high impact all masonry in the high impact areas like bays and support spaces, and hybrid construction, much simpler, easier, lightweight construction for areas like bunks and meeting rooms and things like that. Done it many, many times, and it makes for a more cost-effective building. One of the things, we didn't analyze it, but we certainly look at it as we design a building. And those red and blue blocks that you saw, we know that we can make a hybrid building very easily out of those blocks. So the one you all wanted to see, project budgets. So when we talk about budgets, you have to realize this is going to be a public building, publicly built wage rate in the state of Connecticut with all Connecticut building codes, meeting all the other codes and regulations with a hybrid construction. We have currently gotten some estimates and a recent bid in Connecticut. And as of today, the cost range for that would be in the $700 to $800 per square foot. Right? They're big numbers. We understand that. We would assume that construction wouldn't even begin until at least 2026. And that number 700 to 800 includes what we call escalation. Escalation is not the same as inflation. So currently inflation is what, about 2.5%. Escalation in Connecticut, unfortunately, is running right now at about 5%. It could go up or down. Most likely it'll go up, rarely comes down. So for each year that you wait, you get to add an additional 5% for escalation, buys you absolutely nothing. Gets you no more bricks, no more sticks, labor, it's just noise.
What is that, what are your considerations with the square footage?
I think that there's always room to save on square footage, all right? I don't want to say that right now because we haven't been through the exercise and it's a fairly arduous process to get through that exercise. But if we do our job properly and we look at things like overlapping uses in certain spaces, we look at actual efficiencies in the layout of the building, efficiencies in the layout of the site, we will reduce the size of the building. Whether it's 50 feet or 5,000 feet, I can't tell you that right now, but that's one of the processes we always go through.
I appreciate that, but that wasn't, I think maybe I misstated my question. When you're talking 700 to 800 square feet, is that building costs? Is that infrastructure costs? Is that acquisition? Is that permitting?
Okay. So in any construction project, you have two costs, hard costs. Hard costs are bricks, sticks, and the labor to it. Everything else that's not a hard cost from a contractor to install is what we call a soft cost. So soft costs are things like, architectural and engineering fees, land acquisition, surveys, geotechnical investigation, specialized equipment or technology equipment, if you will, anything that's not in the contractor's contract. All right, so the 700 to 800, hard cost only.
Hard cost only.
Yes.
So soft costs on top of that.
Correct. And the easiest way to do soft costs is if you have land that you own, assume your soft cost, just for rule of thumb, might be about 15%. You do not have land and you have to purchase, it should be anything we figure about 20% of the hard cost as an additional for a total budget. So it takes both numbers to get to be a total budget.
So Dennis, right now, you don't want to, and I'm not asking you to do it because you don't want to do it. You don't want to tell us you have conceptual drawings. It must have some square footage attached, but you're going to refine it.
Yeah.
So you don't really want to lock in on an estimate price yet. I get that, right?
I can't. I mean,
right.
I've done this with other boards, and unless you want to be here till 10 o'clock and answer 70 to 80 very specific questions, I can't hone in on that number because there are so many variables involved.
Okay.
So it is a process that if we continue, that we all get to go through.
So on the slide that says process, where they have that very, very small grid, is that the space analysis for the new proposal or the existing?
No.
All right, so you guys are assuming that this is going to be 24,345 feet.
Yeah. And, that's a pretty direct number, 20,345. All right. I would suspect we could bring that number down probably by about 10%. Just based on past experience. And clearly, if you're going to try to save money on a construction project, there's two places you can go immediately. One is always square footage, bring the size down, right? But the other one is the entire site, all right? So when you start doing site work, utilities, grading, parking, all the things that go into a site. It's a very, very large number. So if we can make the site more economical, the building more economical, we start bringing that number down.
How would you make the site more economical?
There are ways to do parking and drives to get them so they're not, just huge expanses of concrete or asphalt. Bringing the utilities in from one road, not another, anything like that. Anything we can do to keep the site contractor from scraping, digging, anything of that sort. Those are very, very big numbers.
When you were looking at the two reservoir site, did you look to see the proximity of utilities that would need to be extended there? Is that part of the calculation?
Yeah, we believe the utilities are all in the street. They're all close enough that that calculation will capture.
They're not close enough yet, but they will, the water in particular will be.
It will be.
But one of the, this isn't really your problem or the fire department's problem, but this is it's also called a Kogut farm for people that really have seen this address as part of the larger farm. And the town right now, I don't think has any like conceptual plan for future use for other buildings. And that would, in a sense, tie in with what you're saying. It may be more economical right now to do it a certain way for this fire station, but that may not be the most economical way long-term to bring utilities, for example, into the entire site. So I think if we're going to be smart about it, we need to look at what the future uses might be and how we can make sure that we synergize with this work to make sure that we don't, kind of spend money to bring it in one direction and find out, oh, now we have to reroute the electrical around the whole site because we pulled it into that side of the building.
Great point.
Right?
It's a great point, Keith, and you're exactly right. So when we look at a site, nobody can look more than 5 or 10 years into the future, but certainly going to ask those questions. All right. And if that site has other uses, maybe 20 years down the road, you certainly don't want to undo what you're doing today to accommodate that from 20 years from now. So we'll ask those questions and we'll all look as far as we can into our crystal balls to figure that out.
Okay.
Great comment. All right, so project funding. Grants, everybody asks about grants for capital construction unless there are state grants. There are generally no federal grants. But, you're still going to look at state funding. The most logical way that we would see is probably some form of municipal bonds. There are grants for equipment. Your politicians may have member items. And the USDA does have a federal loan program.
Yeah, rural development, right?
Yeah, I seriously doubt you would fit into it.
Why?
Because you have the ability as a town to float bonds. And that would probably disqualify you from the USDA.
We are currently the recipient of a rural development community facilities grant. It was done through a congressionally directed spending appropriation, but we qualify at least under the current iteration of the Farm Bill, which is about a year expired.
Yeah.
So unless they change the population threshold, which they have done from time to time, we do currently qualify.
Okay. Which is good to hear because a lot of times when we talk to USDA, if you have a different funding source, for example, your float bonds, do a CIP or some other thing that a lot of rural fire departments don't have the ability to do, depending upon their amount of money they're left with at the loan time, may or may not disqualify you. So I probably spoke out of turn. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Just as a point, you may not have been aware that we currently are in the program.
Okay. That's good to hear though, because that tells me there's a little more flexibility than what we normally hear.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the reimbursement rate for this would be about 35%.
Yeah, I can't talk about the percentages because it's different for every project, how big it is, how expensive, what you're throwing into the pot, what they're throwing into the pot. Beauty about the federal loan program though, is you can stretch it out as much as 40 years at lower interest rates.
Give me here. My finance director does not like 40-year loans.
Nobody does. Imagine if you had that on your mortgage, your kids would be paying it off. No, but they do have that for those who might need it. So, it's out there. And, Usually they can be anywhere from a point, maybe even up to a point and a half lower on their interest rates. Again, I'm not sure what you guys were able to negotiate, but good for you for doing it.
Well, the community facilities one was a grant, so there's no, we needed to come up with a local piece of it, but otherwise it's free federal money.
Okay,
We do have a USDA rural development loan for water, sewer and water, or sewer expansion. That's a 2% for 40 years.
so nobody likes 40 years, but 2% is not bad.
Well, except based on the debt service. So that was put in place in 2009, and we've only paid off like $60,000 worth of the $2.1 million principal. That's the problem with those long durations is all you're paying is interest.
Yeah.
That was
absolutely.
before our time.
Yeah, he was the only one who was.
Sorry, Alan.
Can't
I'm
blame
blaming
that
you.
One. For you?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
All right, not your fault.
Like 2 years.
Okay.
Might be worth looking at the, I hate to say this, but the Broadbrook Fire Department is structured. I know it's a town department, but also it's a separate entity. And I don't know if the structure of the department might make it eligible for federal grants. Like you're talking about, like a rural fire department that doesn't have access to loans, right? Can't float bonds.
they can float bonds.
Corporation, I don't know.
Corporation can't, but the department can.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I just, maybe somebody should just take a look at whether or not the current configuration would be preventing us from getting federal dollars versus any kind of maybe an alteration that would allow us to do it. Because you're talking about a lot of money here. And if we had a 35% reimbursement rate on this project, it would make all the difference. And if there's a way to configure someone had a conversation with USDA and found out and said, does current structure allow it? Or how could it be restructured if necessary to allow it? We might want to take a look at that.
Assistant chief, fortunately that work, but pretty sure he's looking into all off.
Right.
Been looking into different grants. Funding that we make to water help out.
And to be honest, that's one of the reasons we're here tonight is to talk to this leadership to say, we need help finding funding. That's your responsibility to help us, I think, right? So fairly saying, we're bringing the problem to say, we have a problem, let's solve this problem together.
So what is what is the next step that needs to happen? Let me couch this a different way. Assuming all things broke your way and there were not going to be any changes to the proposal here, what is the next thing that needs to happen to get a shovel in the ground? It's engineering, right?
Yeah, architecture and engineering. And the reason that needs to happen is so that we can really hone in on numbers that people can trust. That 700 to 800, that's a pretty big fat range, okay? We need to take that range and bring it down and bring it down and bring it down. And the only way you can bring that range down is through detail. So as we develop designs and engineering and do more detailed design drawings, et cetera, and can actually say, hey, look, Keith, we actually have, 200 feet of water here and we need, a sewer there. And an estimator can actually estimate that, say, okay, we're fairly confident this building's gonna be XYZ dollars, based on a professional third-party estimate. That's how you get there.
You need the engineering in order to get the estimate though.
Yes, absolutely. Which means you have to spend more money and more time, right?
And you need the engineering to get the USDA grant, to talk to anybody, you need that.
Yeah.
That's ballpark around $125,000 to get those studies, initial concept plans.
Yeah, to get them far enough along to get a professional estimate. It's not gonna get you a built building. In other words, let's say you spend $125,000 on plans and some engineering and architecture. It'll get you far enough to get a very good professional estimate.
And that gets you to the shovel-ready conditions.
Shovel ready, that is a huge amount of work from there. Right?
What
Because
happens then?
then we really go to town with engineers. We have to get surveys on the land. We have to get geotechnical studies done. Engineers have to, figure out how big the foundations are, how deep they are, how much rebar are in them. What's the actual structure? How do we hold that structure up? What is all the electrical, plumbing, mechanical requirements, civil engineering, us for architecture? That's probably about an 8-month process to then have, plans and specifications that you can go out to bid with. All right. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And that's all an additional cost than this year.
But it's part of the soft cost.
It's all part of
It's
this.
part of the soft cost.
Yep.
And-
part of that 15.
And the clearing of the property, the trees and. brush.
That's actually what a contractor would do.
Yeah, with a contractor would do
Yep.
that.
He would do all
It's
that.
actually a pretty fairly clear one too. That's what-
Well, another problem is it's also under a lease.
Yeah.
The lease can be broken, but it takes a year's notice to do it.
It'll take you longer than a year to get enough drawings and enough information for a contractor to even bid on that.
That's actually a great question. How long will it take to get that?
About a year.
Oh, okay.
Just about right.
The data supports, the data and analysis supports the next step. And it does. I mean, it clearly does in terms of the old building and the potential. You didn't cover it here a lot tonight, but you discussed, well, you did, but I know that the department's been going through this analysis for a long time with you guys. So the data is there, the analysis is there, the site is there. So it just seems that we just need to come up with a process to move it along.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna speak on after they were.
All right.
I just have one more quick
Yeah,
question
please.
on the future proofing, as you call it.
Yeah.
10 to 15 years is not that far away, especially when we're gonna lose probably 2.5 to 3 years right up front. So that brings it down. And we know we can, based upon current federal laws, we're gonna go from our gas powered stuff to
Mhm.
the other.
Yep.
My concern is we're going to invest so much in what we currently have that's going to be outdated 12 years after the building is done. How do we find that balance? Or is there a way to find a balance where you can reuse that space and reconvert it at a minimal cost?
Yes. So that's a great question. And that's one of the reasons you hire the architects and the engineers is to help you cross that barrier. Right, we're facing that now in virtually every building we
Right.
do, but especially public buildings. So, for example, you might have natural gas service currently.
Yeah.
All right. It's very possible that the state of Connecticut will tell you in 10 years, 15
Right, you
years,
can't have it.
they can't have it anymore. All right. We're not going to allow it. You know, you may have it, you're grandfathered in, if you will, but we'd like you to switch to electric. You're going to get much better rates, blah, blah, blah. So we design with that in mind, knowing that that is going to happen. All right. One of the things we find with those buildings, because they have large roof expanses and there's a lot of space around the roofs and
Yeah.
around the building itself, solar makes a lot of sense. Right? Do we know exactly where it's going to go and how much it's going to supply? No. But we know it's there and we want to make sure we accommodate it now so you can do it in the future easily and cheaply. Right? So we look at all those things and we talk about them. You know, what makes the most sense? What is cost effective today? We don't want to spend so much money today trying to guess what the future might bring.
Right.
But I think we do know what it is bringing, and certainly electric is where it's going. But as Aubrey mentioned, you know, we're going to give you a good shot at that anyway, because it's going to be a super insulated building. Windows aren't going to leak, doors aren't going to leak, you know, the roof's going to not let water in, all those kind of things aren't going to happen. So it'll be a much more efficient building than what you have now.
Oh, there's no doubt anything is better than what we got right now, in my opinion, and in my opinion as an individual, not a member of the board, just as an individual. I agree with that.
When you're looking at your project cost estimates,
Yeah.
you're also suggesting, I lost the slide now, but that it's the hybrid model versus the prefab or the masonry. So that suggests to me that the 700 to 800 is the mid-range for what this would cost. What is the real low? What is the real high?
That's a great question. I wish I could answer that, but the real low would probably be somewhere around the 600 to 700 range. And the real high would probably be the 800 to 900 range. And at $100 in either direction. I will tell you this, it's distressing, but we know all our competition all over the country. And we certainly know all the folks on the West Coast. And I hate to say this, thank God we're not on the West Coast. They're building fire stations right now, unfortunately, for $1,200 a square foot. Yeah, exactly. Thank God we're not on the West Coast.
So I was just at CCM, the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities it's the league for Connecticut.
Yeah.
And I was talking to some municipal leaders from around the state about firehouses.
Okay.
And they said that they were beside themselves, that they just had to spend $3 to $4 million on a firehouse. Why is theirs 3 to 4 million and ours is 16 to 20?
How big is it? Where is it? Who built it?
This is in
When-
Wellington in particular.
In particular?
Oh, you're not from, I'm sorry, I forgot you're from New York.
Sorry.
Wellington, yeah.
Wellington?
How many population do they have, Wellington?
They got half ours.
Was it did they refurbish an existing building?
No, rebuilt.
Is it just a
Brand
metal?
new, yeah.
It's probably a metal building. That'd be my guess, pre-engineered metal building, maybe 3 bays, 4 maybe, probably significantly smaller. There's 100 reasons. Remember, I told you I'd have to ask you at least 200 questions to narrow the variables. And that's one.
And I'm not gonna be able to answer any of them.
Oh, yeah, you would. You'd be surprised. But anyway, there are so many variables when you're trying to compare buildings, why this costs and why that costs. When it was built, who built it, was it private, was it public? There's a million questions to ask. We do a lot of work in Ohio and public work in Ohio for that exact building that we're talking about here might be $100 a square foot less. Why? They have cheaper labor rates.
Right.
Here, labor rates are probably the same, but was that a private project or a municipal project?
Dennis, the thing I think to Jason's point, can you go back a few slides? You had your study. Go back to it's an eye chart. Keep going back.
That guy?
Right there.
That guy.
That's the list of questions that are operationally oriented questions for the department that factor into the square footage that they would recommend based on the utility of the building and how it's going to be used. So when we talk about apples to apples, when we look at what Wellington might have versus what we might need, there may be significant differences, perhaps half the number of apparatuses, half the number of people, no need for any sleep.
If I'm not mistaken, Wellington, I believe that's 2 fire outlets.
Could be
We only have 1. So we gotta cram all our.
Could be a substation for all we
in
know.
1 space.
It may have no admin space.
The large square footage, you're gonna end up with what you got now.
Right.
10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag.
Just a new problem in a different spot.
Yeah, but I think it highlights the point why there could be significant variations in the square footage requirements. This is, I think, comprehensively what led to their recommendation. It was not just, oh yeah, you guys want a fire station. It was, what are you gonna use? How many calls of this nature do you have? How often are you doing this? I mean, this was the reason that we hired an architect to go through this study. It wasn't just to build a building, it was to look at the actual study, and that's the
It's
output.
the actual final, it's the draft
That's the draft.
print
I
of
mean, the other
the,
thing you got. Trying to design this building to last us 75 to 100 years.
Exactly.
We don't want to build something and 40 years down the road, come back and say, oh, we need a new firehouse. It's small. We're trying to build something that's going to last the long term. I hate to say it, volunteerism is dying. Slowly dying every year. Eventually, at some point within the next, I'd say 10 to 20 years, you will have a full-time paid fire department in this town. And with this size fire station, you're gonna have plenty of room to have a full-time career fire department with bunks, living areas, hot, cold, warm zones. You don't have to worry about that stuff in the future.
Is HFD built out this way?
But the firehouses,
Yeah,
I'd rather comment.
okay.
Could be a problem, conditions.
So I think you want to go back, because you guys were all too different. I just want to wrap it up for you guys.
Yeah.
You guys have other questions.
Do you have any more questions for us? Because we're.
No, it's been a very interesting conversation. I appreciate
Great
it.
questions. I thank the board for excellent questions.
Real quick. 1 story, except for the proposed 1 story.
Yes.
Except for the catwalk, I'll call it catwalk.
Yes, absolutely.
So-
That's another cost
And-
saving.
So then you don't
Yeah,
have to
no
have an
elevator.
elevator and all of
No
that.
elevator. In fact, the elevator is not the issue.
Right,
If you really want to know what the issue is, it's the stairs.
the stairs. Yeah.
Because the way you design stairs today for ADA accessibility and everything,
Flats,
you figure
Yeah.
it's 200 square
Yeah.
feet times 2.
too, yeah.
With 2 stairs, there's 800 square feet at $700 to $800 a square foot, plus additional structure,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. And you repeat spaces, like I got corridors here, corridors there, et cetera, et cetera. You figure from a 1-story to a 2-story, it's probably $1.25 million just for the stairs and the additional redundancy.
And how about, is this slab construction or is there a basement?
Slab, no basement. Okay, again, that'd be a huge extra cost.
Yeah.
Great questions, folks. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
nice job, thank you.
You can keep this.
Thank you very much.
I just want to highlight a couple of things that we thought were important to point out. So right now, the town of East Windsor Broadway Fire Department's annual budget contains around $100,000 to $120,000 in what we call incentive bonus pay, right? So that's your volunteers. When they go show up to calls, they get a certain small incentive. What is it, $15 right now? $15 a call to show up. So there's earmarked in there about $100,000 to $120,000 every year. We have an additional part-time staff that supports the department that has $360,000, right? Yeah, those two together, you're looking at $460,000 per annum, right? That's what it costs for the human capital to show up to calls when our residents need them. And as Deputy Chief Bancroft said, an inevitability may be that we have to look at what does a full-time fire department cost. I think one of the responsibilities of the commission and the leadership of the department and the town is to maximize the use of volunteers because it keeps costs down. To keep a full-time department, you would require approximately 4 shifts, maybe 5 people per shift with 3 chiefs or admin, your chiefs, your deputy chiefs, et cetera, at a tune of approximately $100,000 to $150,000 per person after taxes, healthcare costs, and all those other things. You'll get $2.3 million annually. There's a direct correlation to station design, and we didn't really get into this. It's part of the study, but if you read Firehouse Magazine, if you read a lot of the VCOS, the Volunteer Chiefs Association of the NFPA, right? There's a direct correlation to station design, utility, and maximizing volunteers. Those two things go hand in glove. Am I wrong, Dennison?
You're absolutely correct.
Expertise.
I have an article too, if you want it.
So that's a big part of what we're looking at is, sure, we may need full-time paid staff down the road. We want to push that off as long as possible because of the tax. So that's one thing. More importantly, let's say you do go down the road to a full-time paid department. At some point, they are likely to unionize. And you are going to face workplace grievances because it is unacceptable, the workplace environment that the firefighters have to deal with right now. Not only is there health and safety risks, you're talking about no hot, cold, no, there's just one zone. That's where everything is. And you saw the rates of firefighter cancer, it's coming. And those are things that I think the leadership of this town has a responsibility to address right now. And that's what we're at. So, one of the things that you talked about was NFPA writes standards. It's important to note that they write standards that OSHA uses to cite for violations. So if we ever had an OSHA inspection, for instance, we're likely to be cited for a lack. And the next iteration of OSHA incorporates a whole new host of the NFP standards that Dennis was a part of writing. And we're going to be failure to comply on a lot of those things, right? So, I seem a little excited about this. It's because the fire department responds when called. 820 calls, they're there. And 11,000 members of this community deserve the best service that they can get. So it's been a can that's been kicked down the road far too long. I mean, the fire department was built 4 years after that Charter Oak descendant was gifted to the town. That's a long time ago. And it wasn't built for what it's meant to serve right now. So I would ask the leadership of this town to look at a process to change the map, to earmark that corner lot, get out of the lease and designate it for future use for the Broadwick Fire Department. And that's really one of the first steps that we're looking at the Board of Selectmen to do. The commission has a responsibility to now look at our budget for next year, working with the department and setting a tune of approximately $125,000 to set aside for the engineering and architectural studies. That's what we're looking at for this next fiscal year. It's important that the residents understand that that's all part of an iterative process to get to what's required to have first-in-class fire protection services. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Nice job, thank you.
I'm sorry to ask this of you.
Yeah.
But could you repeat the last thing you said?
I don't remember.
So It was, your ask is the designation of
Yeah.
the corner, and then I was writing that down and I
Yeah.
missed what you said after that.
So designate the corner lot for the Broadwood Fire Department or a future public safety complex, and that's for you guys to decide. You know, I know Keith, you said that that's not what the police chief wants, and I have full respect to his personal and professional opinion on that. We didn't have enough personal and professional opinions, and that's why we hired an architect to look at an operational study to what the best service for the town would be, so that it's not left in our hands. We put it to a third party. I would say that I would recommend that, you know, that the Board of Selectmen consider asking H2M to extend their study to look at a public safety complex. I think it would be a best use of dollars. It may not be the best operational needs of the police department, but that's what H2M's assessment will come out and report.
Well, just for clarification, the reason I used the police in the comments that I made to see if the space was set aside was because that was put in the presentation as a possibility.
It is.
But it could be used for something else. If we wanted to, like an ambulance bay, a substation down the future, it could be used for, you know, a town office if we.
Do you know what you don't have right now in this
Yeah.
town? You don't have an emergency operations center.
Correct.
And my 27 years in the military, and a lot of it was in the National Guard going to disaster areas. When the tornado hit Springfield,
Yep.
they led out of an emergency operations center.
Yep.
Right down the road in Wilbraham, they had an emergency operations center. And that's where their mayor, the police chief, the fire department, that's where they came to run the operation of rebuilding their community after a disaster hit. We don't even have that in this town. So those are things that should be considered by you guys. In the meantime, the fire commission is going to be working, as I said, to your point, Jason, to look at $125,000 probably in the capital improvement line for the next step of plans that would be required to then go to bid for shovel-ready plans. Thank you.
In the meantime, while you guys are formulating out your budget, which starts in July, I'd like to work with you guys to find like non-local dollars, because see, the Community Investment Fund has 4 more rounds attached to it. And I talked with the Deputy Commissioner at DECD today about an unrelated thing, but this concept came up. We could submit a request for CIF funds for the engineering. The way that there's 4, it's a 10-round program. We're coming into round 7. And the way it works is they like projects that we talked about this earlier on the phone, but they like projects that are, we did A and now we're going to do B. They like to see a continuity of progress towards what their investment is. But the way that the money is structured, if you get funding in round 7, you're not eligible in round 8, because by the time you get the money, you can't have done the work to get the application. Right. So if you're in 7, you're eligible, you're probably eligible again in 9. If you're in 8, you're going to get 10, but you're not going to go from 7 to 8. So
if there's money available to do that, that's the next, there's 2 next steps. One is to put the property for designation, right? And that's this body's, requirement. The next step for us would be to pay for and get the set of plans that could go out to bid to say, we know how much it's actually going to cost. You can't do that until we pay that $125,000 approximately fee.
Here, but Mike D'Amato. I'll talk with Mike. I've talked with Mike. He's going to review the conversation tonight to see if we can start formulating an ask.
Thank you.
That would be, that is a May submission. So we would need to go through our process like February, March in order to submit for that.
Yep.
So it should line up well with budget.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
No, I think they did a great job at the presentation.
Yeah, you guys killed it.
Appreciate
That was very, it was
We
entertaining.
only killed it because you asked such good questions.
Oh, we could do this all night. Yeah, really good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like us to stick around for anything?
No, you should get home. 2 hours is a long time tonight.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much for
Thank
letting us on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You got some tough decisions.
I say,
Thank you.
Okay, Next up, we have a memorandum of understanding between the town and United Way. This is something that we've done multiple times in the past, but I need authorization to enter into it.
To approve the memorandum of understanding between the town of East Windsor and the United Way of Central and Northeastern Connecticut. And authorize the signature of the first selectman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Tax refunds.
To approve the tax refunds totaling $1,829.
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So between the holiday and the CCM conference, I don't have a very lengthy report. A couple of things I want to point out. We had a very and ladies, you were there for most of it, but we had a very successful Stuff a Cruiser event with the community services departments and the police union at Walmart this past Sunday. They always do a great job, and that sets us up to provide for disadvantaged families going into the holidays. I also want to recognize a number of my staff, and I had notes written down, and without the notes, I'm going to forget one, which is, I'm going to do it anyway. But we had 5 employees who just completed their CCMO designation. CCMO is Certified Connecticut Municipal Official. They have to take 36 credits in municipal governance, and they're on topics including personal development, community development, and Melissa, what's the third category? There's 3 in there. It's all about making sure that municipal employees are well-rounded. I want to recognize Jennifer Sanchez, Amy Lamb, Ruth Ann Calabrese, Danielle Boudreau, and who's the last one? Angela in the building department. They all completed their work. And now we have more than a dozen municipal employees who have gone through that program. It's basically taking a certification program at the collegiate level. So it's hard work on their part, and I want to make sure that I'm recognizing that. With that, I will turn to Marie.
I had no meeting scheduled. Just for full disclosure, I was asked by the director up at Park Hill if I would write a letter in support of their grant application that they are planning on making involving the 13 acres up there, which I did under my name. They have come back and asked if I would consider re-signing that using East Windsor Deputy First Selectman. I don't feel I have a right to do that as a private individual, doing it a letter for something that may not happen in the future. So, and because I feel strongly that we shouldn't be using our titles here for anybody else's self-purpose again. So I'm going to let them know tomorrow that I'm just going to leave it as a private entity as myself. If they care to tell whoever that I sit on the board, that's up to them, but I'm not going to do that. I don't think that's fair to the board that's here for me to use my position for something that I agree should be done and hope they get it without the consensus of the board. So that's just me. And that's all I got.
All right. Sarah.
This past Monday, December 2nd, I attended the Warehouse Point Fire District meeting. They have scheduled their first budget workshop because we're getting to be that time again, February 3rd. They're scheduling their annual reviews for their chief, fire marshal, and administrative assistant for January 6th. There were 23 inspections and 52 calls in the month of November. And their drone is still being held up in customs. There is a different option that might cost them less money if they're still waiting a while in customs, and they still have pilots that are training for that program. Jason and I attended the Board of Ed Facilities Subcommittee meeting last night. There was a representative from CSG there as well as our consultant, talking about how to move the, community engagement, forward as far as, the plans for the schools, conceptual designs and, how to reach the community to discuss how we want to move forward with combining possibly the middle and high school at the high school campus. There was a timeline proposed. Possibly sending out a survey to residents in January and then a newsletter, in February. The consultant, recently worked with Farmington on a project. So it was informative on, how the group plans to move forward and engage individuals and groups in the community. And there, Andrea Juddle is on there now from the PTO. So there should be more coming with that soon. And that's all that I have.
Thank you. Keith?
All set tonight, thanks.
Had one meeting since our last meeting. It was wetlands last night. They approved a remediation plan for a fairly large violation on South Main Street. That was all the business that they had. That's all I got.
All right. Just as a reminder, our annual town meeting is going to be on December 19th, 2 weeks from tonight. We're going to do a number of pro forma resolutions that the town just does to keep business going. We're going to be accepting the annual town report, and we're going to be accepting the town's capital improvement plan. That's going to be 2 weeks from tonight, 7:30. Public participation. This is the second opportunity for members of the public to address the board. Same rules as before. I'll first turn to anybody who's here in the room and then provide anybody who's online and up. Like to address the board, state your name and your address. Sir, I saw you first, and then the woman in the back.
Wayne Sherry, Depot Street. I'm just puzzled about one thing. It's about the funding of the fire department. Now, as a town, the Warehouse Point District, I think they call it one. District 1.
For voting.
Well, there's two separate entities here, right?
Yeah, if you want to identify by fire department, they're 38, you guys are 39, but.
Okay, regardless, where do they get their money from? The town, is that a general fund?
Who? Where does who get their
They
money?
have a fire tax on their side of town.
We have a fire tax too, but aren't we talking about funding a Broadbrook Fire Department here? I don't get that. I don't understand.
Go ahead.
So the way the town, to understand why this is the way it is, you have to go back in time to 1900. Because around what year? In 1911, they received from the state of Connecticut a taxing district, a municipal in and of itself. That's the Warehouse Point Fire District, right? Right. And Broadbrook is a corporation that started with the wool mill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And was funded primarily by the corporation that paid to protect the mill. Over time, things change. And in the last 100 years, Broadbrook started receiving money to fund the fire department and fire services from the town. Started probably in earnest in the 90s, 80s, 90s, right? Before that, it was all privately funded by the corporation.
What about Warehouse Point?
Warehouse Point taxes its citizens, a separate fire tax, and the Broadbrook side of town taxes its citizens a separate fire tax. Two separate funding streams.
In the 1900s, it was funded by the people in Warehouse Point.
In 1900s, Warehouse Point had their own fire tax, yeah, in 1911, starting in 1911.
Okay.
You have a sewer tax too. They had a sewer tax also back then.
So how did we get to pay the tax here on this side of the Scannick River, we'll say?
Because it was,
The fire department has to be funded prior to 4 or 5 years ago, before the ordinance was passed.
2020.
2020, prior to 2020, the entire town paid for the Broadbrook Fire Department, and the residents of Warehouse Point paid for their fire service. So they were doubly taxed to pay for both sides of town. That ordinance that was passed by the town in a town meeting, which is our
No, referendum.
Referendum.
I'm sorry, referendum, it was passed a referendum, established the Town of East Windsor Broadbrook Fire Commission, which has enabled us to tax solely the people that receive this district's services. That makes sense?
To an extent, to an extent. Now, you're asking for money. I don't know who you are, but anyway, you're representing the fire department, looking for money to build a new firehouse. Okay, who would pay for that? Just the people in Broad?
Yes.
Really?
Just like when Warehouse Point built their new station, the people in Warehouse Point paid for that station.
So how could change?
Well, that's why we're looking for additional funding.
Grants,
Grants.
things that take it down significantly. And bonding is you're paying debt service, but this is a back and forth problem that doesn't need to.
That's what I'm getting to. We're into a kind of a side conversation here. If there are other comments that people would like to address to the board, I'd be happy to entertain those. I think this is a great conversation for you guys to maybe continue offline. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry, lady in the back and then you, sir.
Skanks Road in East Windsor. Have any of you driven down that road?
Yes.
And do you find it accessible?
No.
Taxes go toward the road service. But our road doesn't get any service at all. And is that going to ever change? In the right of way?
It's a private road. It's a private road.
It's a road, it's a road. Everyone uses it. The post office goes down it. Our poor fire department, if they ever hit a pothole down there, they just, blow a tire, front end
You raised some really good points.
down there. It's down.
Point of order, please.
You can turn around, just like the next road next to us.
So, Tom, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. Tom Buckley, Kings Court, Broadbrook. Couple curious questions. The fire department wants to put fire station next to either one of those two schools. You're done?
No, I don't think I
We
was.
I'm sorry. I'm living there too. And it's ridiculous, completely ridiculous. We have the same rights, it's like a discrimination. We have the same rights like the other people. We protect us like the other people. We just soon start get the garbage. We have to come into the scanty road, drop the garbage. We have no mail daily like the other people. We have no water. We have nothing there, nothing.
Sir, two things. First of all, Mr. Buckley had the floor and has an opportunity to make his points. You will be given the same, and when you do, please state your name and your address so that the recording secretary can get that into the minutes.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Buckley, please continue.
Proposal to put a fire station next to either one of those two schools, the middle school or the grammar school.
That was found non-feasible. They explored that as an option. It was found not to be feasible.
And that was also assuming that the school wouldn't be there anymore.
Right.
So it was just an assumption.
Mr. Buckley, please continue.
On that.
So again, maybe that's something that Mr. Mixada can chat with you about offline, but we're really not supposed to be having kind of cross conversations at this point. It's feedback to us.
Well, I'm asking you, but if you don't have the answers, then I guess we can continue on to something else. But I am curious about that decision between those two properties. Do we own those properties at this point?
Yes.
Yeah, we do. Okay. Also, directing, the town passed an expense of 25,000 for security to the fire department. Is that my understanding? Is that what that's all about?
So that you're talking at the last town meeting, the town meeting approved additional monies for locking system upgrades at the fire department, paid for by the Broadbrook Fire Department, not by the town, but they went through the town meeting process because they're required to follow the same appropriations process that we are.
So you're gonna spend that money anyway?
It's their money and they're going to spend it anyway, yes.
Okay, do they need to put it into that building now with considering what, a new building? Would that still be feasible to do that?
Yes, it's already been done.
Well, that answers that question.
The old security system, the key fob system, and firehouse was outdated and was failed. So we needed to do an upgrade.
Does the town service Skanks Road?
No,
Does the South Windsor do the fire coverage on that road?
you'd have to ask South Windsor.
The Bravo Fire Department do it.
No.
Services it. If those-
Again, point of order, we're not supposed to be going back and forth.
I think it would be important to correct that, the last part, just because people might be worried if their house got on fire, that the fire department wouldn't service their road.
There's a robust network of mutual aid that's provided for by fire departments in the region, and whenever there's a fire, somebody's coming.
Anyone can come and service it.
There's
That was my
a
question.
primary call and they have designated mutual aid assistances based on the type and nature and where the fire is, so that you're all, and we're very well serviced here.
How the road was turned over to town, East Windsor. Would that change any of that?
Can't be
Nothing
turned
there
over.
would change.
Can't be turned over. Right now, it's a,
Again, we're not supposed to be having a back and forth, and
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm going to ask for a point of order.
okay.
What's back and forth? I mean,
We're just, there's a lot of side. It's conversation supposed to be, we're supposed to be taking feedback from the public and not going in the other direction.
good enough then. I'll rest my case at this point.
Be safe, guys.
Sir, I believe you were next. Yes, sir.
I just like to.
Name and address first, please, and then state your business. Name and address, please.
Carlos Cristóbal,
Okay,
12 Shank Road.
thank you. Please continue.
Okay, I'm feel upset, well, you guys never did anything to the road. You said it's private road, but it's never private road. Everybody driving there every day, speeding guys, like three guys doing that at the night, burn out the tires, it's really completely what's happened there. I don't know what to say, I just feel upset because, we are like another citizens, we pay taxes, we supposedly have the same rights, at least not have a street, is a small street with the full of holes, it's. I don't know what to say. I'm just feel upset with that.
I understand that. I am too. Sorry. I saw you raise your hand. You're all set. Okay.
I do business. Named Carl Sias, I live on Shank Road. And somebody here just said that road is a right of way. So a right of way to where?
I didn't make the comment. I'm not sure what the reference was to.
No, I'm just saying, someone said that road is not a road, it's a right of way. This is right of way to where?
And that's why we don't have crosstalk, because then inaccurate information gets said and then people are confused. We did not say that. It's not what it is.
What is it?
It's a private road.
But the point is, all of us that live on that road, percentage wise, we pay the same amount of taxes as anybody else in town. We get the least service of anybody in town. A road that needs repair, nobody cares. Nobody wants to own it. Why is that? We pay taxes and yet the town doesn't take care of it. Why is that? Exactly.
Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment? Yes, ma'am. Name and address,
Are
please.
you kidding me?
It's about Skank Roads. I've lived here almost 60 years. And I noticed on Facebook that Selectmen put something about maybe we didn't take care of the road because Black people that live there. And I cannot believe that. All my kids went to school here. They all had black friends. So this is completely way out of line in creating a problem. Yes, it is.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there other public comment? For the second time? Go ahead.
23 East Road. This is talking for a sec. I come to a few different meetings and I watch the board interact. I helped put Keith in that seat up there. I campaigned very hard for him to get a seat on the board, not necessarily that seat, but a seat on the board. I'm very proud to see you up there, Keith. I'm very proud of your actions. I'm very proud of what you do. I'm very proud of how you keep answering questions and posting the answers publicly. I personally want to apologize to you for the snippy way you were treated earlier and the way you were dismissed. I think that was very rude. I think that was very disrespectful and very unprofessional. Back in November, when people voted who they wanted to see on this board, you were all put up there by we the people. We voted to put you up there. We want to see you there. We have confidence in you doing the job the right way. We put Keith on that board. Keith is there for a reason, because people wanted to see him there. People wanted change in this town. And that was step number one right there, putting Keith on the board. And I know that's not something that everybody wants to hear, especially you, Jason, but there needs to be change made in this town. I think the more you treat him disrespectfully, the more you exclude him from different board activities, different conversations, the more other people, not only in town, but people that support you greatly, disrespect him. And to me, a good leader is a person who sets his people up for success, not knocks them down every chance he gets, not disrespects him publicly like you did to him earlier, dismissing him. Again, I think that was very rude, disrespectful, and unprofessional. When I moved to this town, I had just recently gotten a brain injury and I had no life for like the first 4 or 5 years. I saw you come on the scene and I thought you were the greatest thing since sliced bread. I was impressed with you. I supported you. I backed you. I donated to you. I was a mail lady and I picked up your mail and I saw the thank you postcard that you sent out to people. We don't read people's mail, but I saw the stacks of thank yous that you sent out. And I was proud that you did that. I donated to Democrats all my life and I've never gotten a thank you note from any of them. No one. And I was very proud of you and I supported you 500%. And the different things that I've seen you do through my time in town have made me really disrespect you. And I don't feel ashamed to say that. I feel like I'm saying a truth to you that a lot of people want to say, but they don't have the guts to stand up and say it. And they're also afraid of reciprocation, what they're going to get in terms of speaking their mind. Well, I'm speaking my mind. And I think every one of you up there has to recognize that we the people voted last November. We wanted to see change. We implemented change. And that's why Keith is up there. I'm proud of the work he does. You know, I don't understand why you guys just can't freaking get along. You see people in this town want change. You see people voted for change and put him on the board to make change. You know, somebody needs to listen to that. Somebody needs to listen that the people want change, that the people want transparency, the people want honesty, the people want the lawsuits and all the money going towards unnecessary legal fees to stop. I respect Keith. I respect him in that seat. I will put him there and I want to see him succeed. Like I said, a good leader sets his people up for success. I'm just begging you people, please work together. Please don't be publicly disrespectful to each other. Every time you win something, a little tit for tat, it doesn't need to be in the newspaper with a rapier-tongued reply to the person that you won over. It's getting ridiculous. Oh, you know, it used to be every time I told people I came from this town, everybody said, oh, where that nut job Ed Thrall came from. I happen to like the guy, so I just say, yeah, that's the town, but you know, I like the guy. Well, I used to say when people said, oh, where that guy comes from, you. And I would say, yeah, where that guy comes from, and I would say it proudly. I'm being honest with you, I was so proud of you when I, you know, when I first got my head back after the accident. And I can't say that any longer. I got your mother telling me that people are effing.
Okay, that's,
Let's stop
if you want to
there.
direct your comments at me, that's one thing, but no family shots. Here, but
Well,
no
I think
family
the
shots,
3 minutes are up.
no family shots.
I need to, people need to see change and respect on the board. People need to see you respect Keith. We, the people, voted and put him there for a reason. Please, I'm asking you, get along together, respect Keith for the seat he earned. He earned that seat. It was not given to him. It was not paid for. It was earned. He earned that seat. Give him the respect he deserves.
Thank you.
I was asked by someone to read their questions about Shank Road. I'm just gonna quickly go through them. I know you're not allowed to answer, but this-
You're also well in excess of your 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Please make it concise.
they're concerned about who's gonna plow Shank Road this winter and if it was plowed during the snowstorm. And has anybody officially stated they're gonna commit to that task? Is the town of South Windsor still gonna use the 220 Scantic Road property as a park for passive recreation? Are you aware of the feasibility study that they did regarding 220 Skank Road? Anwar Sadat, Anwar and Representative Foster, aware of the ongoings with Shank Road. And are they going to be issuing any grant money to South Windsor after the feasibility study is released? And has Scout Hall indicated anything with South Windsor concerning the transfer of Shank Road? Let's see, if you had a choice, how would you like to see Shank Road issue resolved? And see the property at the end, the open space used? And those are not my questions, those are questions somebody asked me to present to the board.
So if you could send those to me in an email and we'll try and get your responses to those that we can. Some of them I simply don't have. But if you send me an email, I'll get you the responses that we're able to. Is there other public comment? Name and address, please.
44 Melrose Road. It's just like a little bit about the history of the fire department. I've been in the fire department 68 years. We went to Skanks Road fires. Let them call 911. We respond to that call. We've always done that. We do that with private roads all over. There's private roads right in the broad group. There's other private roads around town. Call 911. We'll respond.
I was thinking you were going to tell us more about 68 years ago. Thank you. Is there other public comment? Yes, ma'am, for the second time, name and address.
Patricia Sherry, yeah. To the person that wanted to know, I think that road was the road that went to South Windsor Auto. That right of way. That's it.
Thank you. Is there anybody online who would like to address the members of the Board of Selectmen? If so, please state your name and your address and state your business.
Hi, Jason, Noreen Farmer, 247 South Water Street. I just wanted to thank whomever was responsible for it, either the Traffic Commission or DPW, whoever is doing it, who have put up all of the reflectors along many of our dark roads that have never been there before. I've noticed them recently coming back from the Broadbrook side over to our side. And whoever did it, thank you very much, because they really are beneficial and really do help with the driving situation. So thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Is there other public comments from anyone online? Seeing none, we will have an executive session. It will include the members of the Board of Selectmen, the tax assessor Helen Tots, and attorney Brian McCann. May I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm recusing from Yosky.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
We're in executive session at 8:45. It is 10:17. We're out of executive session. Any further business to come before the board?
Make a motion to add agenda item 9D, Summit Chestnut one more time. Summit Chestnut SNF LLC versus Town of East Windsor, Summit East Windsor LLC versus Town of East Windsor.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor of adding to the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? On that item,
Make a motion to accept the attorney's recommendation for settlement for Summit Chestnut SF, I can't even say it, SNF LLC 171 Main Street and Summit East Windsor LLC 96 Prospect Hill Road.
is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? With no further business to come before the Board of Selectmen, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
That we adjourn at 10:18 PM.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at 10:18 PM.